She was already in her wedding dress when she made the decision that would destroy her own life to save his. She didn't leave a note. She didn't say goodbye. She just took a black horse, rode away from the church at full speed, flowers still pinned in her hair, and let the man she loved more than anything in the world believe she had abandoned him. And the worst part? He never knew the truth. Not for 9 years. This is the story of Elena and Alejandro. And I promise you, by the end of this, something inside your chest is going to feel very different. May 1881. The church was full of white flowers that Elena had handpicked over weeks of happy planning. The guests were dressed in their finest. Children ran between carriages outside. And inside, standing at the altar, was Alejandro Rafael de Villalba, Duke of Villalba. Tall, dark, the most feared and admired man in Spanish aristocracy. He was not the kind of man who showed emotion in public. He was cold, brilliant, controlled. But for Elena, he was none of those things. He had bought a single white flower that morning, just to hand to her when she walked through those doors. The music started. Stopped. Started again. Stopped. His assistant, Rodrigo, his only true friend, slipped out to check. He came back with a look that said everything without saying a word. She wasn't coming. 3 miles away, Elena Salazar, 22 years old, red-braided hair flying loose in the wind, was riding that black horse at full gallop, tears streaming, white dress billowing, not looking back. Because she knew if she looked back, she wouldn't be able to keep going. And she had to keep going. Because on the other side of that road was a world where Alejandro was still alive. 2 days before the wedding, Elena had gone to her father's study to sign a document. The door was slightly open. The voices inside were low, but clear enough. Her father, Edmundo Salazar, was a powerful man with a wide smile that never quite reached his eyes. And on that day, Elena heard him explain, calmly, coldly, the plan he had spent decades building. The Villalba family had ruined the Salazars generations ago. Stolen land. Destroyed their name. And Elena's wedding? It was never a celebration. It was a trap. Elena was the bait. After the marriage, documents would be forged, debts fabricated, and the Villalba fortune would be systematically dismantled from the inside. Elena walked into that study shaking. She confronted her father directly. He didn't deny it. "You will marry him," Edmundo said, calm as winter. "And you will help me take back everything that was stolen from our family. Or," a pause, "he won't survive the end of the week. And you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you're the reason he's dead." Elena knew her father well enough to know he wasn't bluffing. She went to her room, stood in front of the wedding dress hanging on the wall, and understood that she had exactly one option that kept Alejandro breathing. Run. Say nothing. Let him hate her. Forever, if necessary. Because it was better to be hated by him alive than mourned by him dead. Elena rebuilt her life in Ronda, a beautiful, anonymous city where no one knew her name. She cried for weeks. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere so deep it doesn't make any noise. In her 4th month, she found work in a small flower shop. Because flowers had always calmed her. In her 4th year, she bought the shop with her own savings and renovated it with her own hands. But every few months, men from her father would appear with the same message: "He knows where you are." The agreement still stands. Elena would close the door, press her back against the wood, and say to the empty room the only words that kept her standing: "He's alive." It's enough. It wasn't enough. But she said it for 9 years. Under her bed, she kept a wooden box. Inside, Alejandro's letters from their engagement. The wedding invitation. Dried white flowers from a bouquet he had once sent her. And the wedding veil she had taken off before mounting that horse. She didn't open it every night, but she knew it was there. And that box was the only honest thing she owned, proof that the love had been real. that there had been a garden of white roses, a flower in an open palm, a voice saying, "I have a whole life to offer you." And she had said yes, 100 times yes. Meanwhile, Alejandro de Villalba became something colder, harder, and more frightening than he had ever been before. He perfected emotional distance the same way he perfected business decisions, methodically, completely. He expanded the Villalba empire, closed deals no one else could close, built a reputation as a man with no weak points. Because men without weak points are terrifying to everyone who still has theirs. Rodrigo watched all of this. In 30 years beside that man, he had never once seen him look at the ceiling in the dark and remember. Until he did. Every night. 9 years later. A rainy September afternoon in Ronda. Elena was arranging white flowers in her shop window, the same quiet way she had done 1,000 times, when a carriage rolled slowly down the wet cobblestone street. Through the rain-streaked glass, a man looked out, and then he told the driver to stop. Alejandro stepped out into the rain. He stood on the wet sidewalk in his dark coat, rain falling on his shoulders, staring at the woman in the window who had just dropped every flower she was holding. He pushed open the door. The little bell chimed above his head. Elena was facing away from him, hands pressed against the counter, breathing visibly altered. The red braid she had always worn falling down the back of her plain apron. "Elena." Just her name, said in the voice of a man who had kept it locked in his chest for 9 years without realizing how much that had cost him. She turned. Their eyes met, and in the silence between them was everything 9 years had failed to erase. The reunion that followed was cold on the outside and absolutely devastating on the inside. Elena lied, said she was married, showed a fake ring, said life had taken another path. Alejandro listened with a face that gave nothing away. Said only, "I'm glad for you," and left. Outside, he stood on the wet pavement with his eyes closed. Rodrigo waited beside him without a word. Then Alejandro opened his eyes and said quietly, "We're staying." He came back to the shop every day. With excuses. Flowers for the inn, a gift for a neighbor. The excuses were obviously weak and both of them knew it. But what Alejandro was really doing was watching. Noticing how she scanned the street before opening each morning. How she disappeared to the back when strange men walked past. The fear in her eyes that had nothing to do with him and everything to do with something older and more dangerous. Then one night, a storm hit Ronda without warning. Alejandro walked through the downpour to the flower shop because he couldn't stay still in that room with all those pieces in his head. He found a light on in the back. He walked through the dark shop and stopped in the doorway of the storage room. Elena was sitting on the wooden floor, back against the wall, the old wooden box open in her lap. She was holding one of his letters, reading it aloud in a whisper, lips moving over his words, with tears falling down her face in the quiet, exhausted way of someone who has been crying alone for so long that she no longer makes any sound. Beside her on the floor, the wedding invitation, the dried white flowers, the folded wedding veil. The floor creaked. She looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain hammered the roof. The candles threw trembling shadows across the walls. Then Alejandro stepped inside and said in a voice that carried 9 full years of unanswered pain, "Why did you do this, Elena? Why did you leave me at that altar?" It wasn't anger. It was something harder to bear than anger. Elena closed her eyes. When she opened them, the fear was gone, replaced by the look of a woman who had finally reached the end of what she could carry alone. And she told him everything. The documents. Her father's plan. The threat. The morning of the wedding. The dress on the wall. The decision made alone in a locked room. "You didn't deserve to pay for something you didn't even do," she said, her voice at the edge of a whisper. "Your father and mine had a war that wasn't ours. I refused to be the weapon in that war, Even if it cost me losing you. Even if you hated me forever. Because it was better for you to hate me alive than love me dead. Alejandro was completely still for a long moment. Then he lowered himself to the floor beside her, right there, on the wooden boards, surrounded by the letters and dried flowers and the veil, and touched her face with his hand. You should have told me, he said, voice rough. I would have fought for us. She closed her eyes. Tears fell over his fingers. He didn't move his hand. You carried this alone for 9 years, he said. That was never how it was supposed to be. He kissed her. Not with urgency. Not trying to reclaim 9 lost years in one moment. With the deep, unhurried calm of someone who has finally come home after a journey that lasted far too long, and knows that now, finally, there is time. What followed was the ending that the beginning had always deserved. Alejandro stood in the center of the most prestigious ballroom in the region, surrounded by the entire Spanish aristocracy, and publicly acknowledged what the Villalba family had done to the Salazars generations before. He announced the full legal return of everything that had been taken. No negotiation. No conditions. Then he walked across that candlelit room, reached into his coat, and held out a single white flower in his open palm. The room went absolutely silent. Elena Cristina Salazar, he said. I did this once before, in a garden, with no audience. And you said yes with your eyes before you said it with your mouth. A pause. The smallest smile. This time I brought witnesses, so there are no doubts. Laughter, warm and real, moved through the room. I know the last time didn't go exactly as planned, he continued, eyes soft. You left on horseback, if I'm not mistaken. Elena laughed and cried at the exact same moment, the way that only happens when the emotion is too large to fit inside a single expression. Edmundo Salazar stood a few steps behind her, perfectly still. And for the first time in many years, the smile that came to his face also reached his eyes. So I need to ask, Alejandro said, holding her gaze. This time, are you going to stay? Elena let the tears fall without trying to stop them. She breathed in, and said, with a voice that trembled but never wavered for a single second, I'm not going anywhere. I'm yours. Forever. The room erupted. They married the following June, in a small church in Ronda, decorated with white flowers chosen by the bride, exactly as she had once planned, and exactly as she had always deserved. The wooden box with the letters, the dried flowers, and the veil was no longer hidden under the bed. It sat on a shelf in their room, visible, honored, because it was no longer a symbol of pain. It was proof that real love doesn't disappear. It waits. With patience. With quiet certainty. And when it finally arrives, it is more beautiful for everything it survived. Some loves take longer. Some miracles arrive in silence. And some flowers take years to bloom again, but when they do, they are more beautiful than before.